And Brian, you and I talked about it a little bit.
Mhm.
Things like putting the power lines underground. This doesn't seem
Mhm.
to be that expensive compared to 150 billion in possible damages.
Mhm.
So there's a bunch of things like that we could talk about for an hour probably.
Yeah.
That would be, you know, I'm not sure that either one of us have any more knowledge or experience. I'm not a firefighter. The closest I come to being a firefighter is that my son-in-law is a fire marshal.
Well, I've studied the problem of wildfires. I live near San Francisco Bay Area, and there's these large fires around Napa and
Yeah.
around the Bay Area. So I've looked at the um, forest management issues a lot.
Mhm.
So you have to have these large fire breaks. I looked at a 80-page, 100-page document from 50, 80 years ago, where it's like, here's how you manage a forest, right? And you have to like dig these large trenches because when you get a huge fire over many square miles, it gets its own climate and stuff because they're sucking in all this air at high, hurricane speeds, and that means it would be sucking in and blowing out, you know, um, uh,
Embers and
trees and things
yes.
at high speed, 100 miles, 200 miles an hour. So it'll be firing off embers miles ahead of it,
Yeah.
right? So that's the reason that it's not an ordinary, one house fire, three alarm fire with three houses. It's like 1,000 houses as this inferno. And I also looked at um, citywide infernos because I've looked at the problem of, you know, uh, in nuclear war, what happens when you hit a city. And I got the paper written by the U.S. military after the Hiroshima bombings, Nagasaki bombings, and the city firestorms that they created on purpose when they were fighting World War II, right?
Yeah.
So again, I've looked at how they analyze that in terms of like flammable. But I don't think we're going to talk about that issue, but we can have that information as background. You talked about using drones
Well,
to fight the fire. Yeah.
right. Well, and then if you take what you were just talking about and you start to think about there are about four or five different kinds of fires. So you have an actual forest fire. It's a very different thing from a brush fire, okay,
Mhm.
or a chaparral fire. The chaparral fires are all over the world: South Africa, Australia, the Western United States, Canada. These fires, they're not usually as big of a problem if they're in the chaparral, and
Mhm.
you can usually contain them within a reasonable amount of time. Now you add a little bit of plant coverage, a little bit of trees and stuff, and all of a sudden you've got a whole different problem because then the palm fronds in particular are notorious for tearing loose, becoming a little whirligig and going miles and miles and miles, landing on a roof and torching a house. So but when you get into the residential areas, now you've got a completely different thing. You don't have an ability to build fire breaks in a residential area. You
Mhm.
don't have the ability to, usually you can't even get ahead of the fire. And so those are some of the things that started concerning me. And I thought, in a residential neighborhood like the Palisades, what would be what would be wouldn't it be better to have more air fighting equipment as opposed to seven or 12
Right.
be able to handle these? And that's where the first idea came in. I could picture, using existing equipment, existing fixed wing or helicopters, but 50 of them, coming in one after another, getting their water, coming in and firebomb, hitting the fire with the water, and then that one goes away, and the next one comes in right behind it and hits another area. And potentially some of those would be getting ahead of the fire and
Yeah.
drenching areas ahead of the fire. Others would be going right to the heart of the fire. Others would be putting out embers behind the fire because the firefighters can't go in. It's too hot.
Right.
So the result of that, all of that, now I'll share my screen, so I just had Grok. I said, give me some drones dropping water over a fire. Well, anyway, could you imagine, do you think there's any trolls on X? Do you think there's anybody that?
Yes, there are trolls on X. There's trolls all over the internet. Yeah.
So anyway, a few trolls decided that this was, little tiny drones, these hand drones, these small drones that we all use as
Yeah.
hobbyists. And so the ridicule became massive. Well,
Mhm.
the good news out of, in my experience with brainstorming,
Yeah.
is there's something we call in brainstorming, there's no bad ideas.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
the worst idea can then be manipulated by the rest of the people in the brainstorming group in order to come up
Mhm.
with great ideas.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, a lot of trolls, hundreds of would you believe millions and millions of impressions on this?
Yeah.
Uh, and people saying this is the dumbest idea I've ever seen in my entire life. Anyway, but other
Yeah.
people
Mhm.
who visualized it differently, who actually
Mhm.
looked at it and said, oh, these are, large drones,
Yeah.
and maybe this is an idea. And so then the conversation started going back and forth, and we had a brainstorming session
Mhm.
online.
Mhm.
And it's been progressing quite nicely. So Brian, what was your first impression when I told you about a massive drone strike on the Palisades fire? If you happen to be a big fan of the Cybertruck, you might also be interested in this super fun Cybertruck refrigerator magnet and bottle opener. It is made out of super thick stainless steel, just like the Cybertruck, and it has this giant magnet on the back, so it's going to hold a lot of stuff on your refrigerator. It's an amazing gift, and it comes in that great gift box that you saw before that uses a magnet opener, just almost like an Apple box, like when you get Apple products. You can buy it on Amazon for $29.95, or you can buy it direct from me by sending $25 to paypal.me/Randy Kirk, all in lowercase letters. Please indicate whether you want the stainless steel look, or maybe you'd like to have this very clever camo version. And then if you're not in the US, please add $20 for freight. If you'd like more than one, please check the information below to get pricing, as well as all that information I just told you will be repeated in the information below. So once again, think about joining the channel, getting the up-to-date Tesla news every single day. I think you'll be glad you did.